It is that time of the week with Econo Chat. Let's talk business with Mr. Daniel Steinman and myself, Elsie Bitimnyani, as your hostess. Now, today we're going to discuss something that we discuss every day, all day. It is a talk in the household, it's a talk on the street, is a talk in Parliament, I should say, and that is, of course, the cost of living crisis that we are enduring right now. And just yesterday, Mr. Daniel Steinman, I had a moment at home where I was shouting at everyone because I said, I'm the only one, taking care of everyone in this house, and you don't appreciate anything because, the cooking oil. We're talking about cooking oil that's a basic necessity at home.
And they don't
We're talking about
how expensive
butter. We're talking about potatoes.
Everything.
So I had my moment at home yesterday, and today I come here and we're talking about the cost of living
crisis.
Yes. Yeah. So let me first welcome the listeners, of course, and then also, of course, welcome you, Mr. Daniel Steinman. And thank you so much for choosing this topic today, because I don't think that we can ever stop talking about this crisis that we are dealing with right now.
You are right, Elsie. It has become so severe, and it has become so acute. In economics, we only refer to it as the cost of living. But a few months back, let's say about February or March, I started realizing there's absolutely no ground for sugarcoating this thing. It's horrible.
Yeah.
And also we can't try and reduce the impact by hiding or cloaking it in economic jargon. We have to. So I started calling it the cost of living crisis because it is a crisis.
It is a crisis.
It is,
indeed.
And I am not aware of a single household, from rich households to poor households, that is not adversely affected by the cost of living and experiencing it as a crisis. And let me take an example. Coffee. I'm very fond of my percolated coffee. So it means I buy coffee powder in this 1 kilogram bricks. About a year ago, slightly more than a year ago, when that coffee brick was on special, you could still get it for 46 Namibia dollar. Now, Elsie, I don't know if you're a coffee fan.
I am.
But that coffee now, if it is on special, it's 96. It has more than doubled in about 14 months. Now, if that is not a crisis, you must tell me what is a crisis. And it's not only that thing, but what I want to highlight, and I'm not trying to sell this as a positive, although I want to give some hope. Remember, I explained in a previous talk that if inflation comes down, it does not mean prices are coming down. They're not. They are just not rising as fast as they did over the previous year. So the moment you start seeing inflation is now down to 5%, and we hope down to 4% by the end of the year, 4%, then people start thinking, nice, inflation is down, the prices are going to come down. They're not. They are going to continue going up. So it means that the cost of living crisis, that is already a crisis, is not going to get less. It will stay with us, and it will take a couple of years to normalize. And this is what happens with inflation. So what does the average consumer do when he is hit by price increases like we've seen since the end of last year? He start a process that we call avoidance. And it is just a fancy word for saying that stuff is too expensive. He avoids buying them. He or she, because he's got his salary has basically stayed the same or increased by 3.5% if he's lucky, or 5%. Very insignificantly, but the cost of living has gone up by 40, 50, 60%, and in some cases, with some products, even 100%. So you see there's a major imbalance.
And that's also an issue that
it is.
Employers don't want to discuss in meetings, that the price of living is going up, but the salaries are not going up. But that's, of course, another discussion for another day.
Oh, the price of living has doubled.
Yeah.
So that is 100% versus that 3.5% or 5% increment. It is a blatant imbalance. You really can't defend it.
Yeah.
The problem is, and I understand the point of view of the employer, is that the companies are not responsible for the inflation. The inflation, I've explained this in the past, it comes from outside Namibia.
Yeah.
So there's basically very little that we can do. We have to grin and bear. That is basically the only thing that we can do.
But just to quickly hold you on that,
yes,
on that discussion, as much as we are saying that inflation is influenced from outside, especially with Namibia not having the market to produce its own products or produce. But employers are not doing much about it in terms of at least giving an increment, say, in every year, as to put it, in rather giving an increment only when the employees would complain and say that this is the crisis that we are dealing with. What is the employer doing about the situation? Because we do know that because of COVID-19, the pandemic that has affected a lot of businesses globally.
It did.
And still, now we are still in the recovery process. But what are employers doing to also, bring about a safe net for the employees?
Elsie, you will have to ask that one from the employers. I'm going to act typical economist and like a tortoise, put my head inside my shell and make out as if I'm not here. So this is the first thing I want to highlight is avoidance. So you start avoiding buying certain products or making use of certain services. And this may sound simple, and I suppose in a certain sense it is simple. But you have to keep in mind, when we look at this from an academic point of view, we're looking at a single transaction. One consumer avoiding one time buying one product. But that's not how it works in life.
Yeah.
There are more than 2 million of us buying hundreds of products every single day.
Yeah.
So do you see the complexity that comes in it? So the point that's very important to remember is when avoidance start to gather momentum, it creates its own momentum. People talk and they say, don't buy that, it's too expensive. The manufacturer doesn't want to come down with the prices. We can't afford it, is what they say. So then you see that you start getting a groundswell, and there's an involuntary reaction against certain products or certain groups of products. And that is where avoidance start taking on an economic face, where you actually start seeing in the statistics that consumers are steering away from certain categories of products.
Okay, Mr. Daniels. Now let's quickly go on a break. But before we go on a break, I would want to give the listeners, a task to do while we go on that break, is to quickly think how many products you had to downgrade from, say, perhaps from Jacob's Coffee to Recoffee, or from Nammilk to Clover Milk. Just think in your household how many things you had to downgrade. But on that one, let's quickly go for that short break.